Hello, this is Chris Cooper, and a big welcome to the Business Elevation Show today. Delighted to be back with you again after I hope you've had another good week. I think some of you in America were celebrating July the 4th last weekend. So we're going to be talking today about the Call of Antarctica. We're going to be talking about leadership lessons from the coldest continent, which is quite hard to imagine right here. We're actually at 90 degrees Fahrenheit today in the United Kingdom. And my guest today is Leilani Raashida Henry. And what wherever you are in the world right now, what I really hope that you take away from this show, we're now nearly 14 years old, is the importance of actually during your working life contributing to a better world, not exploiting it, extracting more than you need, but actually contributing to making this place a much more positive place to be. There's a lot of challenges happening right now across the globe. But actually, it's down to us. We can't rely on our politicians to do this. We need to be in our spheres, doing good, doing business in a really positive and engaging way. And I believe becoming the best leaders that we possibly can be. So we have a really good focus today with this show on good. And I think the story that we're going to hear about today is going to be one that will be going to be absolutely fascinating, I think, for you. We're going to be talking about with Leilani Raashida Henry, who's a leadership consultant. She's an executive coach and author, and she's got some amazing experience. She's worked with some amazing companies, really big ones in her corporate career, like Honeywell and Lockheed Martin. She's got a master's degree in education and learning. She's created all sorts of different methodologies and tools like the 360-degree leadership vitality checkup and brain jewels for 21st century leaders. But as I say, we're going to focus today on her book, The Call of Antarctica, Exploring and Protecting Earth's Coldest Continent. And the book shares the very powerful but little known story of her father, George W. Gibbs Jr. He was the first person of African descent to set foot on Antarctica. And there are some fascinating lessons about his historic journey, which I think can be helpful to us today in our lives and our leadership. So we'll draw on Leilani's powerful work around whole brain leadership and her development of intuitive tools. And we'll focus in on this story today and think about how we can build our own inner resilience, our own inner ecosystem that can help us to thrive. And also, while considering the importance of environmental stewardship and making a positive social impact. So, whether you're navigating personal change or you're leading teams or you're passionate about protecting the planet, I'm sure there'll be something for all of you here. So, a big welcome today to my guest, Leilani Henry.
Thank you, Chris. So nice to be here.
You're very welcome. Lovely to see you. And yeah, tell us a little bit about where are you? Where's home for you?
I'm in the Rocky Mountains at about 3,000 meters, 45 minutes
Wow.
outside of Denver.
Wow, so that's pretty high.
It's very high. It's the Rocky
Yeah.
Mountain High. Yes.
Yeah, so actually getting close. I mean, I've been the highest I've been about 5,400, but I certainly know once you're getting up towards, three and a half, 4,000, you start to feel the altitude. Do you at three?
You do feel it if you don't live here. So, and if
Yes.
I leave for about 3 weeks and come home, then I have to kind of start over. But yeah, but visitors right away get winded when they're
Do
here.
they? Right. Yeah. And are they at night sort of heavy breathing as they get used to it?
Yeah, there's actually a
Yeah.
retreat center not too far from us, and they have oxygen in the headboards
Oh.
for sleeping. And so the oxygen comes into the small, small cabin. And I did a gig there once and loved it, sleeping with oxygen. It was very interesting. I'd never done that before.
I imagine it's pretty beautiful and inspiring where you are at that height.
It is definitely,
Yeah. And
definitely
is
beautiful.
it?
We have a view of Pikes Peak. For those of you who aren't from the US, Pikes Peak is the mountain where America the Beautiful, that song was written. And in our view, 60 miles away is Colorado Springs and Pikes Peak.
Wow. Wow. Sounds lovely. Sounds lovely. So tell us a little bit. Were you brought up in that area? What was life like growing up for you?
I was born in Hawaii, and then the
Ah.
cosmic joke is I grew up in Minnesota. And it's a famous town. It's Rochester, Minnesota, where the Mayo Clinic is. So that's an international healthcare facility most people know about. But yeah, we spent time in East Coast and West Coast and ended up at an early age in Minnesota.
Well, so I co-authored a book called The Power to Get Things Done, whether you feel like it or not, with a former clinical psychologist from Minnesota. And I think he was a clinical psychologist in that hospital.
Oh, at
Yeah.
Mayo. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah,
It's it's a
Dr. Stephen.
it's a wonderful company.
So tell us a little bit about you brought up in Hawaii and you clearly had a very fascinating father in George W. Gibbs. I imagine. Tell us a little bit about what life was like growing up with him and your family. Um,
Well, it's interesting because his early life before he had a family was the Antarctica.
I
So
see.
by the time he had a family, he went back to college. He retired from the Navy, so he had actually this second life with the family. And so he was an older father. He was the same generation as my maternal grandmother. So he was kind of an anomaly. I didn't quite understand him. He was fun. He loved the outdoors. So we were doing things outside as much as possible. And he had this he did things like eating raw egg with orange juice and milk in a blender. And we all thought that was pretty odd. I did taste it, but I didn't acquire a taste for it. And no one else, none of my friends' parents ate that. So he did, quirky things like that. But I admired him almost from afar because he was a public figure and a community activist. So he was always gone doing meetings, busy life. Everybody knew who he was. At one point, he was contemplating running for mayor, uh, so of Rochester, Minnesota. So it was a dynamic situation, and I didn't quite understand who he was. His friends would say, if you see George Gibbs on the speaking docket, if you knew he was going to be the keynote speaker, you knew what he was going to speak about, which was the South Pole and Antarctica. So everybody laughed about that. But
Yeah.
I wasn't that interested in it. So unfortunately, I could have, been interviewing him my whole life, but I didn't do that.
Yeah. So I guess he had a bit of a wanderlust, did he? Antarctica is a long way to go, and certainly in those days when he went. Uh,
Yes.
but then to find be in Hawaii and then go from Hawaii to Minnesota. Now that's not close, is it? Hawaii to Minnesota.
No, it's quite far, but actually we went from Hawaii to San Diego to Buffalo, New York, to Massachusetts, then to Minnesota.
Wow. So how did that impact you then? Moving from location to location, I imagine setting up in new schools and making
Well,
new
yeah,
friends
this
and
was all
learning.
before, yeah, this was actually all before I was in school. So it
Really?
didn't feel, yeah,
Yeah.
it just was where I lived and making new friends. But as 2 or 3 years old, it didn't really
That's
matter that much. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so tell us a little bit about your journey then from that life and obviously moved, but you settled in Minnesota, in the Rocky Mountains. Tell us a little bit about the journey that you went through to do what you do today.
Sure. Well, I think a couple of touchstones. One is that when I got old enough, my father had retired from IBM and started his own business. So all his life, he wanted to be an entrepreneur. So when he started his company by himself, and I wasn't working, he invited me to be a part of his company. And I kept saying no because I was more inclined to public service and nonprofit and charities. And I didn't know anything about corporations, but he kept calling me and saying, please, I think this would be great for you. So he was a wonderful salesperson and he wasn't going to take no for an answer, but he was very patient. So after about a month of calling almost every day, then I finally gave in. And that was the beginning of me working in a business, and our customers were corporations. So my first, and then Honeywell wooed me away from his company after a year, and we were doing technical recruiting. So
Hmm.
we were recruiting engineers, mostly software engineers. So I became a college recruiter at Honeywell. That was my first position. And then I went on to do the organizational development and the training and facilitation and all of that. So my father was actually my first coach.
Hmm. Yeah. It's so from that, so you just recently, I know, you were supposed to be going to Bali and you didn't make it. Do you want to tell us the story, and then and then we can maybe just understand what it is you actually do today?
Okay, okay, sure. Well, so I mean, I my skill set is facilitation, strategic planning, executive coaching, etc. And I've braided some of my work in the healing and wellness business. So, I'm certified in brain gym and touch for health, and these are disciplines that work with the whole brain and the whole body. And so what I was finding is that I had a separate kind of leadership and corporate career. Then I had a hobby of healing. And then I have this Antarctica piece, writing a book about my father's experiences. And it felt very disjointed.
Mm.
So I started trying to understand how could I bring these things together, and started using a little bit of the healing and mind body work in coaching, and then realize that organizations and people, we all have some sort of learning disability in a way, right? I mean, we have
Yeah.
anxiety, we have stress, we have all of those things. And then in a way, those are deficiencies that we can heal and balance. So when I started looking at it from that perspective, then they started becoming more and more integrated.
Mm.
And then the Antarctica piece, my father was ended up being the first Black person in the world to set foot on Antarctica, quite by accident, and we can talk about that in a little bit. But I wanted to, when I started understanding how important Antarctica is for the planet and our ecosystem, then I started realizing, how do we protect it, and what is our connection between the earth and ourselves? And so that was another piece that I started integrating in. So
Mm.
in Bali, your question about Bali is, I was going to speak at a color, light, and sound healing conference. And I was going to talk about kaleidoscopes and color and light and sound. Kaleidoscopes is another thread because my partner makes kaleidoscopes. Henry Bergeson is a world-class kaleidoscope maker. And they're not toys, they're art pieces. They start
Mm.
at about $200. And so I've been researching the connection between mind body and mindfulness and kaleidoscopes, and looking through a kaleidoscope.
I think I've certainly found in my own life, with points with me with all the consultancy and coaching and speaking I was doing, and then the radio show, and then I started to build this community, and it all felt a little fragmented. But actually, this is a point now where it feels like it's all come together in one, in a holistic piece, and it all makes absolute sense. So sometimes we don't quite know why we go down these avenues, but it's interesting how you reach a point when suddenly it all comes together.
Yes, well, I appreciate you having me on your show, because this I'm finally feeling my stride in being able to explain all these different threads. And so it'll be interesting to see how people respond, because they all are very, very different.
Yeah.
But I'm at least feeling, and the other piece that I bring in is the embodiment piece. So I mentioned mind body, but actually the better word for it is embodying change. And so what happens is that when people say they want something, they want to break a habit, they want to do something differently, and they find themselves in homeostasis where they can't make the change. It's because our bodies are habitual, our minds and our bodies are habitual, and the part of the brain that has that doesn't have language, the amygdala is one of those parts of the brain, has no language, you have to do other things besides talk yourself into a new habit.
Mm,
You have to move differently. You
mm,
have to use color and light and sound. And then that changes your brain and that helps you then break that pattern. So that's another way that all these things are connected.
mm. Yeah, and yeah, that's fascinating. It's fascinating. It's going to be yeah, we're going to be really interesting to see how this all really does come together over the next few years for you. For you, I also somebody once said to me, which was really helpful because I'm somebody who loves variety. So
Yeah.
when I had different components of things I was doing and different portfolio of things really, so it's we always people always used to say, oh, you should be in a niche. It should be like an inch wide and a mile deep. But actually, what they said to me was, it's okay to enjoy variety. And actually, maybe that's a gift that you have that you can. And actually, when I allow myself just to relax into it and think, I say, actually, it's okay. I can enjoy this. I'm enjoying it. But it all then started to come together and make sense. So, tell us a little bit about why you decided to write the book, The Call of Antarctica, and about your father being the first person of African descent to set foot in Antarctica, and maybe also you could start to tell us a bit about his journey and what that must have been like for him when he went. Um,
Yeah, sure. Well, so he passed away in the year 2000, and he died on his birthday.
oh.
So he was a bit of a mystic, but I didn't really understand that part either. Um, so he had commissioned someone to write a book with him. And she was a news editor at a paper in Minnesota. And I met with her after he died, and I thought, okay, great. How do we get this book off the ground? And she said, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not able to write the book because I'm starting a family and I don't have time to do both. So she gave me everything back, all his notes and recordings, and I knew nothing about the project. I knew nothing about Antarctica, nothing about the expedition. So I committed though to I just felt like there's something important here. And maybe it was a family story or a family business. I didn't quite know, but I thought, okay, this is auspicious. And then a few months later, early 2001, my mother found his diaries in the back of the dresser when she was moving to sell the house. And he had two diaries intact. And the first diary had written every single day for 6 months, round trip on this old 68-year-old wooden ship. So to back up a little bit, this was an expedition. It was Admiral Richard E. Byrd's famous explorer, the first person to fly over the North Pole and the South Pole. So he was the expedition leader. And so, what's I
And
gonna
what
say?
year was this?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it was 1939 was the beginning of the expedition. November 22nd, 1939 is when they left. And then they reached Little America 3, which was the third base that Richard E. Byrd wanted to build. And they got there January 14th, 1940. And their job was on this expedition was a partnership with the US military. This was the first non-private expedition that Byrd had done. And he was actually commissioned by President Roosevelt to partner because of what was happening in Germany and the danger of the World War II. Was America going to get in there or not? And so it didn't feel safe. So they wanted to partner. So it was a military expedition. It was actually a secret mission. All the goals were not known to the explorers and to the crew, but the job was that they were sailing down to put civilians, scientists on the ice to live for a year or more, to study the continent, to understand how to work with cold weather, and actually to maybe make a permanent base to help claim part of Antarctica because the United States hadn't done any of that yet.
Mm. And what was your father's role? How did your father find himself on that expedition?
Okay, so he had gotten out of the Navy, had decided he'd served his 4 years, he was done. And on the 89th day, what he discovered was civilian life for a Black person in 1939 during Jim Crow, during segregation years. Black people were not treated well. They weren't able to get jobs according to their skill level. It was about these are the jobs that you can do, that we've assigned you. So after 89 days of that, he decided that it wasn't optimal to be a civilian and he wanted to re-enlist in the Navy. So when he
Right.
went to re-enlist, because he was a civil community activist, he wanted to go to Spain and help Spain clean up their civil war. And the United States said, we're not doing that. You're not going to go to Spain, but would you like to go to Antarctica? No, he didn't know anything about Antarctica, but he said yes and passed the physical, very rigorous physical. And he was mess attendant 3, which was the quote lowest rank on the ship, because at that time the Navy was also segregated and people of color in particular only could do certain jobs, only were assigned certain jobs.
Yeah.
So working as in the kitchen as a mess attendant was pretty much all you could do.
Mm. But he so was it what so what made him do that? Was it his wanderlust? Do you think?
You mean
What
to
attracted him?
America? You mean
Because
to go?
well,
Sorry.
he clearly loved to, he clearly liked somebody who liked to travel and experience different things. But to go to the coldest continent in the world, to be somebody who's clearly very intelligent and bright and interesting, to because of his color, to be find himself the most junior person on the boat with prejudice. You're locked in
Yeah,
on the boat. You can't get off, can you? And
right.
what drove him, do you think?
Well, first of all, he had been in the Navy for 4 years, so he
Yeah.
was used to a little bit of the lifestyle. And I think the wanderlust, the curiosity was also part of that. It was kind of like, well, why not?
Yes.
And kind of like, well, what else am I going to do?
Yes.
Because he had been working in a paper mill at night, very hot. You can talk about, we're experiencing very hot weather now. So imagine that as a job, working at night, no breaks, sweating all the time. It smells, it's very tough work. So he realized that probably sailing on a ship was probably better than that.
Yeah. Yeah. Although it does, that in 1938, going somewhere that no one, few people had ever been to, it was not a safe place to go to. That, there was high risk.
Correct. Very, very high risk. So I think it was almost like a catch 22, right? I mean, do I stay and suffer as a civilian and have even less control over my life as a civilian in the United States? Or do I take a risk?
Hmm.
And it didn't seem probably like a huge risk. It felt, I think, more like an adventure.
Yeah.
And it turned out even better, I think, than he thought it was going to be. I mean, I don't know what he thought it was going to be, but he actually had opportunities on that ship because of Admiral Byrd's leadership.
Right. So we've just got about 3 minutes till the commercial break, and what I'd like to do after the break is talk about some of the some of the lessons, some of the things that you think are important from that journey. But he got to presumably they got to Antarctica, and they wanted to put people on the ice. You said for to live for you. What was the experience from in terms of the journey really that he did to take him home, and then we'll chat after the break about the learning.
Okay. You want me to answer that now?
Yeah, I think I've got two
Yeah,
minutes.
sure. Okay. So, well, it was quite treacherous, as many people know in the UK, because there are a lot of Antarctica fans.
Hmm.
So you
Yeah.
know that how hard it is. It's rough. The seas are rough. They ran out of water, so they had to ration water. There were times when the waves were so high, the ship is, pitching and rolling that they couldn't eat. They could only eat sandwiches. So, and then when they got down there, they were stuck in the ice several times. They couldn't get to the destinations. So there were a lot of hardships that they experienced. They were homesick. They didn't know exactly why they were going either.
Oh, right.
So, yeah, so it
Mm,
was quite rough. And yet in his diaries, he hardly ever complained.
mm,
And that, shows his character, and it shows, one strategy of dealing in adversity is, not complaining and knowing that things will turn out and that your attitude is everything.
yeah, yeah. Well, on that note, we're going to go to commercial break now. We'll just be away for a couple of minutes. Do join us after the break and hear some of the inspiration, the lessons, and the learnings from this incredible trip to Antarctica. We'll be back with you again in just a couple of minutes. Hi, this is Chris Cooper. I'm with Leilani Henry, and we're talking about the Call of Antarctica. We're talking about also we're going to move into some leadership lessons, which is what we set out to do. But we were hearing about the incredible story of Leilani's father, George W. Gibbs Jr., and him traveling to Antarctica. Do you want to share a little bit more, Leilani, about his adventure? And about upon writing this book and looking back through his diaries, what were some of the key lessons and learnings that you took that you think are really relevant that you maybe share with your clients today from this adventure?
Yeah, so it's a long list. I mean, I think both of my parents growing up were very much steeped in leadership. And so I was able to see, so modeling, leaders that model great behaviors is one of the first strategies. And his first teacher was Admiral Byrd. So
Mm,
to see and Captain Cruzen, and to see how they handled, there were some middle managers on the ship, what we call them today, middle managers, who weren't used to working with Black people. They weren't used to, that they grew up in segregation. So the leaders of the ship, the admiral and the captain, weren't going to allow that. So, it's all hands on deck, no matter what color the hands. So
yeah,
they set the tone every time there was a project, every time there was something, they just grabbed people and volunteered people to do the jobs and train them along the way. And they weren't going to take this negative spin on human relations. So my father got a chance to work with admirals, to work with people internationally. And that was all because of the leadership, how they modeled expectations that, we are all in this together. We're all on the ship together. And similar to the planet, I mean, we have one planet, we're all here, it's our home. So to understand that whatever situation you find yourself in, whatever collective, whatever team, whatever community or organization, that we're all in this together.
yeah.
And they modeled that beautifully. Another thing that I think was important is that they didn't dwell on punishing the people who weren't on board, so to speak, with the values. But what they did was they highlighted my father's accomplishments, and they gave him awards, and they gave him. I mean, the reason that he became the first person of African descent to set foot on the continent is because the admiral made that happen. He was actually the first man off the ship, and they
Mm,
strategized that this would be an honor for him. So, the thinking, the forward thinking and the vision and kind of one step ahead
yeah.
of the people who are the naysayers is also a really good strategy that I learned. And he definitely learned that during his life after the Navy. I also think know thyself. You asked me about, my experiences in Antarctica also. And I also work with Antarctic scientists as a consultant and do, team building and executive coaching, et cetera, helping them work together on the ice in particular.
Oh,
And their Antarctica forces you to go within. It forces you to take in the silence. It forces you to understand your responses and your reactions and deal with loneliness or deal with conflict. You can't just, call your mother, call your friend and work out a conflict. You have to just be there. You're eating with people, you're sleeping with people, you're working, there's no break. So that strategy of knowing yourself and knowing when to step back and knowing what your triggers are and the things that upset you, being able to talk about those or draw or paint or do something on your spare time to kind of get it out. Probably, I never thought about this till now, but probably the writing that my father did in his diary was a way of coping with what
yes,
he was experiencing.
yes, yes. And you talk about the importance of evolving your inner ecosystem. And it seems like the captain of the ship, he was mindful of what the culture was like, and he was almost adapting everyone's, that's in the culture, which had probably had an impact on everybody's inner ecosystem. People have been brought up in with segregation, for example. So he was changing that culture. Um,
Definitely,
and
definitely.
yeah, do you want to say a little bit more about that? Because you do a lot of work around.
Well, I mean, I was also thinking about even the selection, because in my career, I started off in recruiting. And
Yes.
so, you also have to see, the best fit for people and, what their strategies are for coping when things aren't working and how they deal with conflict. And one of the strategies Admiral Byrd had was he selected people from all across the US. So that in that sense, people that know about the US know that if you're from California, that's a very different culture than South
Yeah.
Carolina,
Yes.
than New York City, blah, blah, blah. So he selected people. So right away, they had to learn about each other and understand each other because they couldn't make any assumptions because they brought these different cultures with them and then building the ship culture. So I think part of the strategy is what is our community working with Antarctic Sciences today? We made some agreements. We talked about best practices. We talked about expectations. We talked about what happens when you break an agreement. How do you recover? So a lot of those things, as much as possible, to make visible. So it's like making the invisible visible to
Yeah.
people and giving them permission to to make those things visible and not assume anything. We have to challenge our assumptions. And I don't think that everything needs to be talked about. There are certain people that they have to talk about everything. And there are some that don't want to do that. And so I'm not advocating you have to talk about everything. I think, though, that listening is critical and picking up on cues when you're in extreme environments.
Mm.
Somebody is not going to tell you that they're not feeling well, but you might notice it.
Yeah.
So to heighten your ability to listen and to notice and observe is very critical.
Mm. And what did you've been to Antarctica? Was your experience like of visiting Antarctica, and how did it perhaps help you understand more about what your father went through? Was it what you expected? What were the unexpected?
Yeah, well, I didn't quite know what to expect, but I was kind of ready. I was kind of braced for danger, and
Yeah.
watching out and being careful. And that actually did not serve me. So my I've been twice, and the first time I went, I was almost like, I lifted weights and I was ready. But it's not like that. I mean, I stepped into the water and my boots got wet before we even started our hike, for example. So it's in a way, it's more like vulnerability and softness is what you need because you can't conquer Antarctica.
No.
I mean, Amundsen and Scott tried, and Amundsen did, and Scott didn't. Um, but I think that there's a balance. I'm talking about inner ecosystem. There's a balance between the reflection and action. And if you're too much ready for action, then all of a sudden you have to be patient because you can't get to where you're going. Even on our trip, this last trip, I spoke at a National Geographic Lindblad cruise, and they would tell us every day what we are going to do that day because the night before they couldn't plan it. They weren't sure if we could break through the ice or if
Yes.
we could get to our destination. So that idea of flexibility was very much in my face. And I think of myself as a flexible, adaptable person. But there was, that was on a scale of 1 to 10, that was a 10 every single day. You don't know what to expect. So
Mm.
that's not something that I understood. And then, there's a joke if you're in Antarctica and the weather is a certain way, wait 5 minutes, it'll change. So there's a lot of change. When I got there my first time, they were talking up, um, going on zodiac boats and visiting glaciers and all this stuff. And then we got there, it was snowing. And they
Ah,
said, well, we might not be able to do any of that now.
yes,
And then 10 minutes later, the weather was different. So
yes.
I also feel like Antarctica was in my DNA when I went down there. So this idea that we do get things from our family, we do get family patterns, we do get things that are in our cells that are passed down from ancestors because it felt very familiar. Maybe that was growing up in Minnesota also partly, and then being in Colorado with the mountains and
Mm.
the dryness that we have in Colorado is similar to Antarctica. So that part felt familiar. And then one last thing I think is I did feel, the call of Antarctica. It does call people. And there are many people, many explorers, many people that work there now, many scientists, they go back and back and back. It does draw you in.
And what draws you in?
For me, I think that the silence,
Yeah.
for me, that there aren't human thought forms there. I'm actually, if I could draw a picture of what humanity looks like on the planet, I think there's places where the atmosphere is filled with our thoughts and our
Mm.
feelings, and our
Mm.
assumptions, and all of that. And Antarctica seems pretty free of that. So I felt that metaphysical connection with all there is and the silence. And the beauty is absolutely stunning. The fragility is very emotional, and that everything is condensed there. So you feel everything, and everything is very dramatic, and it's just so different
Yeah.
in that
And,
way.
and does it make you feel have any feelings about your own significance when you're there, when you're in somewhere that's so vast with so few people?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it does make you feel small, and yet being connected to the cosmos. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a place where we study the cosmos
Yes.
because it's the clearest atmosphere. And then there's the other side of that, Chris, which is it's fragile. Should we even be going there? You
Yeah.
know, if we are there, then what kind of stewardship do we need to practice once we've been there and we understand how fragile it is and how powerful it is and the resource? I mean, Admiral Byrd was instrumental in saying this is for our future. This continent is for the future of humanity. So we need to preserve it. And we're in a position now in the next, 2041 to 2048, where the Antarctic treaties will start to will expire, and we need to figure out, are we going to continue to protect it through with the treaty? There are over 55 countries now that have signed the treaty, and there's agreements that need to be made to continue. Otherwise, it'll just be up for grabs and anything goes, and you can mine and you can do whatever you want there. I don't think that's for the benefit of humanity for us to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. It does feel like we're moving a bit more towards a free for all for Arctic, the Arctic and the Antarctic. It feels like for exploitation, which is really worrying.
Yeah, I mean, the Arctic has basically essentially melted, and
The
there
race,
are
yeah.
people, that
Like a
humanity
race,
lives
yeah.
in that part of the world. So that's almost like inevitable. The Antarctica, we don't live there. It's not going to be ice free for a while. So we do have the ability to work together. And you'd asked me about lessons and the connection between working with the environment and what can we do. And I want to just make sure I say that people working together, people getting along, people resolving conflicts, is the most important lesson that I learned from Antarctica. And that's the one that I want to impart on people is yes, you can have LEDs and you can recycle and you can, do all these things, slow fashion. All those things are important. To me, the most important thing is how we relate to each other and how we resolve polarities and conflicts and tensions and polarization is what I meant. Yeah. To me, that's the most important in terms of preserving the planet. I mean, actually, the planet's going to be fine.
Fine. Yeah.
It's the human beings.
Yes.
And that's the lesson we need to get is giving people grace and understanding each other.
Yeah. And this is the most important thing right now, isn't it? In this phase of our humanity, if we're going to survive, as you're right, the planet will bounce back, and it will find it easier when if we're not around. But if we're going to survive and live in harmony with it, we need to come together like we've not done before, and we've got the technology to do that. Um, so
But
it
do we
needs,
have the will? Do we
yeah,
have the willpower?
yeah,
And it's almost like I'm starting to see, and some of my friends and colleagues are talking about, it's almost like there is, there are things that do need to die, and there are systems and processes that will do that. And my mission is to work with the systems that are growing, work with the people that are growing, work with consciousness. And you're doing that too, so that letting the things fall away that are no longer serving us and not fighting those things. And in a way, thinking about, well, Antarctica is melting and what is being revealed. And I think there is a purity that's being revealed that we could understand better. And that purity is in ourselves, that place of us. I mean, everyone has, whether it's a 0.5% or 1%, whatever it is, right? Everybody's got a purity. Some people have more, some people have less, but it's that I think that we need to connect with in order to have more harmony and understanding.
I love that. Like a newborn child, that purity before before it's impacted. But I hadn't thought about that, and I've never been to the Antarctic. I've been to in the inner, so I've been to the towards the Arctic. But there is a purity, isn't there? There's a purity of light and a purity, as you say, with the constellations and seeing untouched snow and ice and the blueness of it and the colours and it's special, isn't it? So yeah, you're inspiring people, I think, to come together and think, how do we regain that purity again? How do we raise our consciousness to be able to um, undo some of the damage that we've done, but actually move us better onto together onto a positive trajectory. Um,
Yeah. And it also starts with, again, quieting the mind and letting the creative mind come forward. Um, Having grace, forgiving yourself as you do that for others. I mean, all that stuff
mm,
is self, and a lot of times people don't work together well because they haven't taken care of themselves. They're in pain, they don't feel well, they're angry, whatever it is, right? So there is a personal individual piece as well as a collective piece, and we can't they go together. You can't just do the collective and not work with individuals, and you can't just work with individuals and not influence the systems around us.
yes, yes. Hey, it's been fantastic talking to you. I also want to applaud you because you broke your arm a week or two ago, and you've only had it put into plaster this week, and you've managed to show up for this interview today in remarkable form with tremendous energy. So thank you so much for contributing. And I think that those thoughts about purity and getting back to that and coming together as we need to, as your father did on that ship and so ably as well led by Admiral Byrd, who seemed to understand about the importance of setting the right culture, but also helping people to overcome some of the barriers and issues that they had within themselves, because it's an inside job. He seemed like a remarkable man with him recruiting across America as well and bringing people with different backgrounds and interests together. So absolutely brilliant. So if you want to find out more about Leilani, go check out the Call of Antarctica.com. You can buy this great book exploring and protecting the Earth's coldest continent. Also, beingandliving.com. And you also have this fascinating site called brainjewels.com as well. So do go and check all those things out. Once again, huge pleasure, Leilani, to have you on the show today. And I'm excited to hear how your journey continues and all these people that you're helping around the globe. I'm sure greatly appreciate that too. So take care, everybody. I'll be back with you again with another show next week. And go away and have a think about this. Think, is there something that you've taken from this? Is it the thought of the importance of silence and getting away to somewhere quiet so you can, collect your thoughts, or is there some work you have to do internally on your own in an ecosystem, or is the culture where you're working, does it need you as a leader to step up and operate more like Admiral Byrd? Take care, everybody. Any questions or comments, chris@chriscooper.co.uk. And I'm sure through those sites like beingandliving.com, you can contact Leilani if you want to too. Take care. Bye.